All right, who I am? Well, that is a big question. So my name's Laurie Von Belk. I'm from the traditional territory of the Wasanich people, so just outside Victoria. And I am now privileged to be living and learning on the traditional territory of the Musqueam peoples at the University of British Columbia. I am studying, I'm doing my PhD. I'm also an occupational therapist. And so we can talk more about what that is. A fantastic career if anyone's interested. And I do a few other things. So in terms of kind of my working life and career, so I practice as an occupational therapist. And then in my PhD, I do research, which is very exciting. I'll tell you more about that. And then I am also president of the Teachers Assistants Union at the University of British Columbia. So we represent 3,700 graduate and undergraduate students at the university. And then I have a few other, little side gigs, but we'll stop there for now.
Thanks, Laura. And Monty, I'll continue the same if you don't mind. Great. I normally don't use a microphone. People can usually hear me from a block away. But I'll do that for everybody here. So hi, yeah, my name's Monty Lilburn, and I'm glad to be here. You weren't at Stanley Park. In place of yesterday's conference is a wedding today, and I was invited to stay for lunch, but I chose to come here instead. So, yes, I currently am an instructor at the Vancouver Community College, and what I do there is I teach people how to use assistive technology and access information. So that could be information on a PC, it could be information on a Mac, it could be information on an Android cell phone or even an iPhone. So what I do there is I teach people with a range of vision. They could have low vision or they could have no vision, how to access that technology through a range of software packages and hardware packages. And essentially our goal is to enable people to access information, whether it's for pleasure or for education or for employment. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I've done a bunch of things over my career. I think I'm almost stretching the definition of young, probably. But I've had a career that's lasted 20 years, and I've had 6 different jobs within that, counted on the way here, in 2 different continents. So I'm sure we'll get into that over time, but that's where we're at so far, and I'll pass it to the next person.
Yeah, I'm Donovan Tilsley back again. Unlike Monty, I've only really had the same job for the last 10 years and one before that, but I'm a full-time insurance broker at Buntain Insurance in Vancouver, so we do house insurance, car insurance, even boat insurance, Craig. So that's what I've been. Aside from that, I've also had a side business doing speaking for events like this and for corporate gigs. As well, I was I never worked in radio, but I for a time was co-owner of a company in Whistler, or of a radio station that launched 6 years ago. Unfortunately, my dad and I sold our shares before the launch, but the company remains Four Senses Entertainment Incorporated, kind of a spin-off from my situation. So that's kind of more of my story. Craig.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Oh, you're stuck with me again. So I won't go on a long time. I guess I talked about technology, but not so much about what I did as a career and do. So I did say that I currently work at CNIB as an assistive technology intern. So I teach technology to clients and do troubleshooting and stuff with people over the phone. Some speaking presentations like this. I've only actually done that since December. So when I was a kid, my brother, who is also blind, and we started a Braille publishing business when we were 15 and 16. And we kind of rode the dot-com boom. You know, in a way, they say in business that it takes the right idea at the right time with the right team. And so we hit all those marks, I suppose. And so we were one of the first companies to start offering Braille production online. And we quickly branched out into doing a lot of production of products. And so that's where all my travel came in, because it was such a chore. I had to go to Asia to oversee the manufacturing process, and then Europe and South America and Australia. I've been to all the continents except Antarctica, which really bugs me. So I had to go there to sell it. And so it was quite successful. And so for that reason, I never did go to college in my 20s, which was a good thing and a bad thing, honestly. Later, I kind of regretted it. So my brother and I each bought a house in Abbotsford when we were like 22 and 23. We did really well all through our 20s. Then some family trouble hit, and I had to sell my shares in the business. And there was a non-compete clause. So then I bought a gift shop and a clothing store. So I went from online sales to old-fashioned brick and mortar. And for the first time, I actually had employees instead of it just being a family enterprise. So I had 2 full-time managers and a few part-time staff, and did that for about 5 years and got to travel some, just domestically, mostly within Canada and the US, to go to trade shows and do the buying. It's kind of interesting because any of you in retail will know that you have to plan almost a year in advance for sales. So we would have just packed away the Christmas trees at the store and in our personal lives. And then the very next month in January, we would fly to freezing cold Toronto and start buying Christmas stuff all over again for the store. And we would place all our pre-orders, and then the inventory would come in starting in September and October. And so we had like 4 months of Christmas at the store. So we did that for several years until online shopping became more and more prevalent, and something that the public did just as a matter of course rather than just when they needed specialized products. And so we eventually had to close the store down. So that's when I went to Louisiana for a year and got training and did an internship in rehab teaching. And so then that brings me back to today. So that's my career stuff. Who should I pass this to?
I think that you were the last one for the general introduction, so
Okay.
thanks for that.
You're going to pick on somebody else.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's right. But I'm sure we'll get back to you in
Okay.
no time at all. So thanks for those introductions. If everyone's okay with it, I'm actually going to kick it off with a question. And as you probably know already, one of the things that we've been thinking about as a kind of central or guiding theme over the last couple of days is branding yourself online. So this is all part of the National Young Leaders Program, which is an educational initiative for young people living with vision loss. And one thing that young people have to think about today is how to navigate through a rather challenging job market that is defined by precarious labor and social media. So can you just speak a little bit to your own experiences with that, and specifically if you're interested in kind of going in this direction, maybe you could also say how you've sort of presented yourself, how you've asked others, peers, colleagues, potential employers, etc., to see you as. And I use those words very specifically because the theme for the National Young Leaders Program this year, of course, is See Me As. We use it as a hashtag because it's a social media campaign as well. So yeah, if you could speak a little bit about your experiences sort of charting those waters and kind of presenting yourself and branding yourself, if you want to use that rather corporate lingo, that would be wonderful. And I'll just kind of open that up for whoever wants to speak first. Yeah, sure. There's my.
All right, so it's Laura again. So I think I'll start just with the nitty-gritties of it. So like what platforms I used and things like that. And I became an occupational therapist. So I was just finishing my professional master's, and we were having a conversation with a professor, and I was kind of like, oh, like this LinkedIn thing, like it's just like another Facebook. I don't really have time for all this junk. And she said, well, no, I think it might be valuable. And then I was recruited and got my first job before I graduated, and started working right away. So it's like, oh, okay, so maybe this thing is actually useful. And then I also started using Twitter because for professional reasons. So I go to a lot of conferences and just am involved in advocacy, activism, and scholarship. And it has been a very valuable platform for that. I write a paper, it gets published, and I tweet about it, and someone in Australia is calling me like, oh, we should collaborate on a project, and this is really exciting, and oh, maybe there is actually something to this social media stuff. So yeah, it has been valuable for me in that sense. And then like who I am, or see me as, is that right? Did I get it right? Oh, good. Oh, phew. Hashtag see me as. I can't do the little thing with my fingers, but so I think one thing that I try to highlight in my approach and how I want people to see me as is that as a blind person, I am not a sighted person missing the sight. I am a blind person, and blindness brings unique gifts to the world. So that's my perspective on being blind. So that is part of my branding, as we've been putting it today, and so that is prominent in my in the way I present myself in social media, and then it's always challenging when you wear a lot of different hats to think about, okay, like, so should I list like all these different positions I hold? Now I teach over there and I do this and that. So an approach that I have taken is, instead of listing all the stuff I do and the chair of this and member of that committee, whatever, I do include that, but the things I include first are related to kind of my core values and the why behind what I do. So why am I doing this? So I talk about things like I'm an advocate, and I'm an activist, and I am a scholar and an educator. So I tend to use words like that first, instead of saying like what my title is or what my role is. Rather, I try to highlight who I am and what my values are. And part of that too is when people are finding me online, I want their values to be aligned with mine. And if they're not, they see my values first and they're like, oh, this person does not align with our values as a company or whatever. That's fine. I don't want to work with them because we don't align. So that's part of why I've made that decision as well. And I will let someone else talk for a little while. Do you want to?
Anyone else on the subject? Donovan and then Monty will
Sure.
go to you after Donovan. Okay.
Well, I think my primary social media would be Facebook, because it's easy to post on. I do have a LinkedIn account. Maybe Monty or Craig can give me some tips on it. I don't find it the most accessible platform to use with JAWS, but I do have it, and have a work profile on there, and will connect with people on there. Twitter I've used, but again, I just find it very vast and easy to kind of get lost in the rabbit hole of Twitter. And up until a couple of years ago, I did have a personal website, which I've actually got to resurrect to kind of promote me as a speaker and an ex-athlete. I guess I like to, the brand I like to put on social media is more of the blind person pushing limits. Not particularly career related, although I will put some interesting fun facts if something is insurance related or of the like on my Facebook. But a lot of what you'll see me on social media is skiing, rock climbing, doing fun adventures. The way I like to present on social media is it's either got to be funny, informative, or have a wow factor to it. Negativity, you see the posts on Facebook all the time, people ranting about this, that, and the other thing, and that's not me, so I'm not going to do that. I guess I would have to say, see me as dynamic. That would be kind of in a nutshell. Monty, do you want to take it?
Thanks, Donovan. So I think what we're really talking about here is networking, and Donovan touched on that earlier and how important that is. But that's really your ultimate goal, is to have a network. And whether that's a personal network of friends or if that's a professional network, it's really your ultimate goal. And so there's different ways of doing that. And certainly the online world allows us to use certain things at our disposal that, for the most part, are quite accessible and puts us on an even footing with everybody else. And so I agree. Something like LinkedIn is very important. I personally don't use LinkedIn as much as I possibly could, because I'm also pretty big on my own online privacy. And if you make yourself public online, then all sorts of things could happen, especially if you're paranoid. And so my personal data, it's expensive. So if a company wants it, they can offer me a price, but I'm not necessarily up for giving it to them for free. However, you do need to balance that with advertising yourself, branding yourself, giving yourself an online presence. Because if your in-person network is small, then you need to advertise yourself, because that's how people start finding out about you. Now, one of the things I didn't mention earlier is I'm also a business owner. I have my own IT consultancy. It's mostly based in the United Kingdom, and that's where all of my clients are at the moment. So it means that I do a lot of overnight things when I'm not teaching in the daytime. And that's where I really had to sort of boost my social media and online presence, because I was just starting out and I needed some clients. So I needed to make sure I was at least on LinkedIn. I didn't have to give out all my details. I had to make sure that I was tweeting a little bit, so I did that. Had to make sure I was on Facebook and using all of those channels. Made sure I was also at a lot of events, giving talks, because what happens at events when you give talks is people summarize them, people put them online, people tag you. So that is another way of networking. And so I sort of did that. And then when it came time to developing a website, my plate was full. I didn't want any more clients. I was moving back to Canada and didn't really just make it stop. I'll keep the clients I have, but I don't want to develop an all singing and all dancing website to attract more attention, because now I need to lay low and get on with the clients I have. So it was a good problem to have. But really, through all of that, I think the way I would like people to see me as is good at what I do. I mean, I don't go around telling people that I think I'm good at what I do, because if I'm not, then I don't want them to find that out. But really, it's the result, right? So if you did a good job for somebody, if you did somebody a favor, even if it's for free, then people are going to notice that. People are going to see what you do. People are going to see results, and hopefully that will go viral, whether it's online or offline. Yeah, I hope people see me as good. I hope confidence and networking too. I don't know. It's hard to. Maybe that's why I don't use Twitter that much, because I'm not very good at keeping it concise. But that's how it is. So I don't know if someone else wants to add.
Yeah, I will. Alrighty, thank you. Well, this isn't probably the answer that everybody's expecting, but up until actually very recently, I pretty much used no social media at all. I guess for personal, I'd seen a lot of young people getting addicted and spending so much time on it. So I had a Facebook account that I'd set up years ago, but closed it when, I forget which of their many scandals came out. I was like, no, forget this. But that did change somewhat. So I've had websites for a very long time, of course, for the Braille publishing business. I had a website for that. And then now I do own a small startup business in Washington State, selling a totally waterproof talking watch. And so I do have that. But for my jobs, I didn't need LinkedIn to find them. I think simply because, and Monty probably knows this too, there is kind of a shortage of rehab teachers and assistive technology instructors across Canada and across the United States. And so you still have to be obviously good and competent at what you do, but if you're out there, sometimes, if you do express interest in jobs, it's not as hard to get people's attention maybe. But what made me get into social media is I've had a dream for many years of sailing across the Pacific Ocean and eventually around the world on my boat. And of course, the only thing standing in the way was a little bit of money. So I got wind, actually last year when I was living in Louisiana, about it's a contest called the Holman Prize for Blind Ambition. And it's put on by the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind. And basically it's a $25,000 prize that is awarded to 3 ambitious blind people every year from anywhere in the world. And so I thought, oh, hey, this is a great thing to try for. Why not? I mean, the chances aren't great, but hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So my friend and I put together a little 90-second pitch video of different scenes of sailing and what I want to do, and saying how, if I win, I'd make this short documentary and all this kind of stuff. And then I was submitting, and I read the FAQs again, and it was like, you have to promote your video on social media, and you have to get the word out there. And I was like, oh, no. So then the only social media I use now is a YouTube channel to host some of our sailing videos. And like Donovan said, we're doing some more videos. Like when I went skydiving a couple weeks ago, we put a little video up of that. But again, it's got to be positive. I liked what you said. What were your 3 words? It's got to be informative, humorous and positive. Exactly. And those 3 things are key. The negative ranters, I have no patience with either. And then I do have an Instagram too, because the Lighthouse wants to see that you have reach for your competition. So who knows? I'm in the semifinals now. You have to keep promoting the video to get further, so I do. But it is a tool. I guess it's like anything else. It can be used for good or bad. And it's a wonderful thing if you use it for good. And I do agree that probably getting a LinkedIn profile set up definitely has value. And this summit has pushed that near the top of my list. So thank you all.
Thanks, Greg. So I just wanted to open it up for questions. Patrick, is your hand up? No. Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought you were raising your hand.
Retracts it.
Yeah.
My Twitter handle, by the way, @LYBOT. Just so you know,
what
if
does that
anyone's
stand for?
tweeting. Laurie Yvonne Bulk, occupational therapist.
Aha. All right, mine is just @Blind Captain.
Oh, nice. I like that. Captain.
Well, Blind Sailor was taken. That's what I wanted, but someone else had it. So,
I'm at Donovan Speaks.
oh, that's good.
That's good too.
And the website I need to restart is limitlessvision.ca.
Nice.
So my handle on Twitter is Monty747 because I like planes. And also my website is quintagonal.com. That's where I do my business stuff from. It's a very bad website at the moment, so don't let that be a reflection of my skills. But like I said, I'm trying to keep people away, not attract them. And yeah.
That's great. Thanks. Questions? Yeah, Sam.
This one is, what is an occupational
Therapist.
therapist? Yes, what is that?
This is a great question. Okay. So as an occupational therapist, I get asked this all the time. So when we use the word occupation, we don't just mean a job. We mean anything that occupies a human being. So any meaningful life activity. So occupational therapy is a regulated health profession. Sometimes I also think it's equally art and science. It involves a lot of creativity. So we work with people to help them do what is meaningful to them. So most often it is people who either have a disability or have an injury, and we help them get back to doing what's meaningful to them. So it might involve helping them find equipment, technology, or strategies to live with whatever disability that they have and to thrive as a disabled person. It might also involve helping people regain some capacity. So I'll give you a couple quick examples. One occupational therapist here in BC is doing work around prenatal care, premature infant care. Trying to eliminate or minimize the amount of pain that premature infants experience, trying to help families learn how to care for this infant. And then all the way up to people working with someone who's over 100 and their families and trying to help them thrive as a person living with Alzheimer's. Or working with someone who's been injured in a motor vehicle accident and perhaps has a concussion and some broken bones. Helping them heal and be able to be safe in their home while they're healing, and then helping them get back to whatever is meaningful to them. One last example, we often work with individuals who've had a stroke. And when you have a stroke, sometimes you lose function on one side of your body, in your arm and your hand and your leg. We'll help people do exercises to start to regain some of that function. And we really highlight, why do you want to be able to bend your arm, for example? Well, I want to be able to feed myself. So then we'll say, okay, well, your arm isn't bending as well as it used to, so maybe we will construct a longer handled spoon that has a bend in it so that you don't have to bend your arm as far and you can still feed yourself. So that's the occupation, is eating. So that's our emphasis. What do you want to be able to do? How can we make sure you're doing that? Great question.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I have
Emily.
It's Emily at the back. I have a question / comment, because it was said a few times, you guys, like in talking about social media and your presence on social media, keeping it positive, which I totally agree with, and I'm a positive person, which makes me feel weird about asking this question because it might be seen as a little negative. So social media is like, I kind of wrote down this little sentence that like, we have a robot in our pockets that kind of is just meant to show us how green the grass is of everyone else. And we're only seeing these positive or happy stories that people are posting. A lot of the time, and I know this is changing right now, that everyone's kind of being more transparent about things. I know I've said the word transparent 18 times today, I'm sorry. But I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on branding and in yourself of like, and we talked about like the blurred lines of professional and like personal social medias and yourself, of how what your thoughts on the next steps are for yourselves as like on social media and in your careers of keeping your like the world of mental health is kind of coming into the forefront of everything. Like it's no longer a private thing that people are living with, it's now in the public. So how does anyone feel about the next steps of that within your own social media and lives? If anyone cares to share, it's a personal thing, so you do it.
I'm happy to share.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
go then.
okay.
Okay. All right. So great question, and thank you for asking it. So I think for me, when I think I agree with this, not wanting to engage in the negativity on social media in terms of like going on a rant against another human being. But I do think it's important to, as you say, be transparent, have authenticity, all these buzzwords. And often the way I think about it is, how is this going to benefit someone else? So if I've had just a really terrible day, I'm probably not going to just post a complaining about how my day was. Mind you, I also don't post when I had a great day. I post when something's interesting or I think people should know about something, but anyway. But I will post things like, I experienced this, it was really difficult. Does anyone have a similar experience or suggestions? So that's kind of a negative thing, like this was really difficult. Does anyone have suggestions? And I do that because I think that might generate dialogue. I think that might benefit someone else. Or I might, in terms of, now this isn't social media as much, but when I'm working with individuals as an occupational therapist, sometimes I do disclose stuff about my personal experience. And the way that we think about it, we think about something called therapeutic use of self. Lots of big words in healthcare. But I think about, am I sharing this for me or am I sharing this for the client? for the person with whom I'm working. And if it's for me, then I'm not going to share it because this isn't about me. This is about other people. Yeah, so I'll let you say a few words.
Well, I don't really have much to add to what you said, Laura. You pretty much, no, you did a great job. The only thing I just wanted to add, maybe I sounded a little harsh when I said I didn't like rants on social media. And what I meant by that was really, I do find, like, we've all heard that expression, first world problems. And I just find it not inspiring or positive when you see people complaining about little nothing things in person or online. It doesn't really matter to me. I just like to be positive and look at the glass as half full. And I really appreciate it when others around me do the same. Having said that, life isn't always perfect. I know that. And I think when people share, like you said, when people share their struggles in a real constructive way, and when they're issues that really do warrant comment and not just, someone was nasty to me on the subway, like that's just a nothing thing you got to shrug off. But if they're, more important things or things that really do matter, I do want to hear about them, and I think value can be gained from sharing those. But still, like you said, in a positive way that either people are going to give you real constructive advice about a real issue, or you're sharing it to benefit other people. I know in my rehab teaching, sometimes, again, if it will benefit the person, if they're going through something that I went through myself, a few years ago, I'll briefly share my story and tell how I overcame what they're dealing with now, as an encouragement to try and nudge them along through the journey of getting used to their vision loss, for instance. But I know it's a child's book, but I think often of that book, It Could Always Be Worse. And there's actually a little book, and it's, I don't know if any of you read it, but it's about this farmer who, I don't know, I think they have to sell more and more of their land, so they bring more and more animals into their house. And it gets more and more chaotic. And then finally, when they're able to put the animals back out again, they're really grateful for what they had when they started. And so I think that attitude of gratitude and realizing how fortunate we are to live where we do and have what we do is really important, even as we're striving for things better and new and exciting. So that's everything.
I wasn't trying to catch you in a gotcha moment. I'm curious about people's
Sure.
results. No,
Yeah.
Great answer so far. I love it.
I think a lot has been said already, and which I would all agree with. Personal journey, I've definitely an example of that being very public, and that I alluded to earlier that I lost my dad 3 years ago. When he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he decided to write a blog about it. Reason being, he wanted to normalize his life experience, so when he was seeing people on the golf course or talking to other friends, he wouldn't have to talk about his cancer. He could just say, read the blog. So, and he's an excellent writer, and it was out there, it was public. Thanks. And then he, when I knew that he probably was going to last a while, so a few months into the blog, I was like, Dad, can I put this up on Facebook? And he said, sure. And it got to such a wider audience by just me reposting that every week. And then when he died, grief for a lot of people is they kind of want to retreat. For me, it was a very beautiful experience because of all the outpouring of support I got from friends I hadn't talked to in a while, old friends, his colleagues, and that was all through social media. And again, on anniversaries like his birthday and the anniversary of his passing, I'll share a memory or a photo or something. So obviously not a great time, but it's something that brings people together and keeps the memory alive. Another example of that is one time coming through being in the UK and being forgotten at the tarmac on London Heathrow, going from Belfast through London to Geneva, and thinking, who messed up here? So I think I put something on Twitter or an open letter to British Airways and like, who can I contact? And it wasn't to put anybody down or say like, you're not taking care of the blind, whatever. It was like, this is what happened. Why did this happen? Can you please provide an explanation? And I did, and I think there was a couple of errors on both sides, but that's where something like that would benefit. Similar thing a few years ago, I got a bag stolen with a Victor Reader stream in it. A month after my dad had passed, and it had the only audio recording of his funeral on this system. So that actually got the media involved, and I posted on social media, and I had Global and CTV and CBC, and again, not negative, but people found out about it, never did get it back, but it shows how powerful a tool it really is. Monty.
And I can say the blog that Donovan's father kept of his journey was really insightful. I didn't know your father, but I thought it was very good, and it certainly touched me. So, yeah, really appreciate that. But back to sort of the question, I think how I deal with that is I have a bit of a checklist. So I sort of think, first of all, is what I'm going to say, what I'm going to project into the ether. Is it helpful? Is it helpful to me? Is it helpful to other people? And then I figure out, will it make me happy or will it make somebody else happy? And I think, will it make me money? Will it make someone else money? Because that's also quite helpful when it comes to this kind of stuff. And then what you do also have to think about is how is it going to be perceived and received? Because really, if it's going to do more harm than good, then you have to ask yourself, why do it? And it's a free country, so you don't have to. And lastly, you have to be comfortable. So you need to be comfortable with how it will be received. And it may not be received the way you intended. So you really need to sort of make sure that you do that. And lastly, I would say one of the good things about social media or the internet in general, we forget this sometimes, but we don't have to click on something, and there is an off button on our phone. So if you're not happy with how social media is treating you, I mean, I don't know that you can overly take it personally a lot of the time, because after all, people say things online that they wouldn't say to your face. So you need to be aware of that and be comfortable with your presence on there. And if you don't like it, pull the plug.
Patrick.
All right, I do have a question this time. I know you guys have all taken very different paths, and I guess my question to each of you as people who are blind or visually impaired, as we've got a room here, some of us who are just embarking on our careers, we make mistakes. There are certain cringe moments, things we wish we could do over. So my question to each of you is, if you could go back to when you were starting your career or embarking on that adventure, what is one thing that you wish you could have told yourself that would have been helpful at that point in time as you went into your career? And if you want to qualify it, that'd be awesome too.
I have fun.
Yeah.
So I shared a little bit before about how in high school, I started a business and it was successful fairly quickly. Well, that was good and bad, I would say. I mean, it was good because my brother and I enjoyed success, a fair degree of financial freedom and freedom of time and things too, although we did have to work really hard, especially at Christmas time. But I think with that, maybe a little too much success too soon came a feeling of too much self-sufficiency, perhaps. And so when there started to be difficulty in our family, our only way of dealing with it was to have a family meeting. Well, sometimes, it goes beyond that. And if I could go back and tell myself one thing that I've learned since then over and over, and all the things I've been able to achieve since, is get, professional advice, either from a counselor or a lawyer or a business coach or whoever is in your field. Because I think if I had, instead of just trying to make it go away and talk it through, that's good to start, but if I had sought a bit of advice sooner, I think it might have had a different outcome, and a really positive one at that. So, and that also perhaps came from the fact that I didn't get a college education in my 20s. I went back to school in my 30s to Louisiana. And some of the things I learned there would have been really helpful to know, like, 10 years ago or something. So I would just say don't, and it's harder too when you're young, but don't have a shame to admit you don't know something, or admit that you need help. Because I found too in talking about this with people at church that they're like, oh yeah, my family ran into that a few years ago, and I should have opened up sooner because I felt that I was better able to listen to their advice, and then later on better able to empathize with things that they were going through. So that was my one little takeaway.
Okay, they get more time to think about it. They're further along the line. So I do like one of the, well, all of what you said, but one of them I'll pick up on too was admitting when you don't know things. Like, just be curious. And like, if someone asks you something and you don't know, don't just kind of pretend you do, as so many of us are tempted to do. But instead, don't, like you can frame it in a good way, but be curious. And like, oh, I don't actually know what that acronym stands for. Can you tell me more about that? Instead of just nodding and yeah, I'm gonna go Google that. And then I think another thing that I didn't take too long to discover it, but I think enjoy the journey. Like, whether you're going to school or getting your job or whatever you're doing, like, it's not just about doing exams, making a grade so you can get a good job. You're also living right now. So you're on a journey, but the destination isn't the only important thing. And another thing kind of related to that is soaking in everything along your journey, and I guess not focusing too much on your goal, because your goal might change. I've learned over and over again to make plans, but to hold them in open hands, because I might have certain plans and I think they're fantastic, but sometimes those plans get changed, and it's also fantastic, even better. But looking back, I think, oh, I wish I had like written that more down when I was taking that class, because now it's relevant. But I thought, oh, it's not going to be relevant because I'm going to be doing such and such. Yeah, so those are a couple things.
So great, Laura. That was actually one of the buzzwords my dad used when coaching me. He'd say, it was a Confucius saying, the joy is in the journey. And it's something that you always have to, because I think we're so outcome driven as a society, and especially as high achievers, and any high achiever, that they want to accomplish a goal, but at what extent? What are you losing along the way that you don't have to lose? I guess for me, looking back, and I forgot to say this at the bat, but I did my degree in English Lit at UBC, and of course I was in a fraternity as well. And being in a fraternity, there are different positions you could hold to help out, and as well probably in the university. And I never held a position, and I was always very reluctant to take on those sorts of responsibilities, because I had this fear that I would then be giving of my time and losing time and not having enough time for myself and the things I really wanted to do, but it would be kind of stuck in something. And I think looking back, I wish I had gotten involved more with organizations, with groups. I think now I definitely am. I know for myself, I'm not an organizer. You don't want me to run something, but I'm good to get up and speak and bring people together. But I wish I had known that more in my late teens and early 20s, and gotten involved and stepped up and been a part of something, making something bigger, rather than just coming along for the ride, as it were.
I think what everybody said here has been great, and I think I'm going to take some of those suggestions on board as well. But if I think of the sort of two things that I would suggest, and things that I've learned from my experience, is number one, keep an open mind, because my education has to do with IT and business and marketing, not particularly assistive technology, but that's where I ended up for half of my career, really. And it's something I don't think I thought was going to happen. I thought I would be doing something on the 31st tower of a building, 31st floor of a building. I can't speak. But instead I work on the ground floor of a college. So I think it's keep an open mind, number one. And number two, don't stay still. So if you hit an obstacle, go around it, keep moving forward. If you need to start challenging yourself because your life is becoming stagnant or your job's becoming stagnant, keep moving forward, don't stay still. And I think I haven't been open-minded sometimes, and sometimes I've stayed still. And I don't think either of those things have served me very well. And so those are things that I've learned, and hopefully I'll learn quite a few more things along the path.
One quick thing to add, and great points. My other thing that just came to mind, I should have said it, be patient. Things aren't going to happen right away. You're not going to, rise to success in a month or 6 months or even a year. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. Don't expect it to happen right away.